Wonderful. So we are getting ready to get started. Wanted to give you guys a chance to get settled, and a reminder that we are also streaming live to our Facebook page, the Church Health Facebook page. If you have friends who didn't get a chance to register, and would just like a quick way to watch, they can go to our Facebook Live, and we'll also be answering questions from our Facebook Live as well as here in our Zoom call. For those of you who this is your first time on one of our webinars, my name is Joshua Narcissus. I am on staff at Church Health and I serve with the Faith Community Engagement Team. I'm also on staff at Mississippi Boulevard where I serve as part of the pastoral staff. Today we are joined by Pastor Travis, who's going to help us walk through how do we maintain church giving during COVID-19. Just a few housekeeping things I'd like to jump into before I pass it on to Pastor Moody to lead us in our webinar. First and foremost, Church Health is here to be a resource as we seek to be faithful in serving those that God has given us the charge to care for. And so as part of that, we have a Facebook group called Memphis Clergy COVID-19 Group. That group can be found on Facebook. Just go ahead and ask yourself to ask to join. And in doing so, you'll get access to some of the information that we're sending out everywhere from when the next webinar is coming up to having discussions about best practices that are emerging for maintaining worship during this time. Also, after we finish this webinar, you'll receive supporting documents and information to the email address that you submitted upon registration. So you can continue to be in contact with us through email. We're trying to make sure that we're giving you the most up-to-date and useful information that can best resource you guys as you serve. And so now I'm going to get us started by introducing Pastor Travis Moody. So Pastor Travis Moody is the founder and president of the Loma Group, a consulting firm that he forms to help churches and individuals live out their God-given purposes. He also serves as the associate pastor of the Life Church of Memphis. He's an author of numerous books. Pastor Moody attended Georgia Tech on a football scholarship and graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering. He also received an MBA from Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. He has over 17 years managerial and executive experience with 3 Fortune 500 companies. And he has been married to his amazing wife. I'm gonna make sure I say amazing because it's in the bio. Amazing wife, Carol, for over 29 years. They have 2 daughters and 2 sons, and that they live in Cordova, Tennessee. Pastor Moody, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So I'm going to pass it over to you, and you can lead us in our discussion about how do we church giving throughout this crisis. Oh, and before you start, actually, the last thing I want to remind folks is that if you have questions, please use the Q&A button and not the chat feature. Please use the Q&A button. For me, it's to the left of my share button. For you, it might be someplace else to submit your questions, and we'll take that and pass it on to Pastor Moody at the end of our time together.
Great. So I'm going to share my presentation. I can just select that.
Yep.
Let's see here. Let's try that. So can you see that fine?
I can. It looks like me. Yep.
Okay. And so first of all, I know there are a lot of different pastors, different churches here. And so this is very broad. And let me say, I'm coming from a place of, I guess, trying to talk to the churches I think need the most help. I know there's some churches who aren't doing that bad. They've been online for a while and they have online giving. And if that's you, then this may not be as helpful, but I want to talk to where I think most churches are. I joined the Life Church in 2008 and came on staff in 2011 as the stewardship pastor. And so I spent the last several years really helping the church to develop a culture of generosity. And so we hadn't gotten it perfect, but we've tried a lot of things. We found out a lot of things that don't work, and we found a few things that do work. So some of what I'm sharing is really just some of the things we've learned along the way. If you want more details, my latest book is called "Focus on the Gift, on the Giver, Not the Gift," and it goes into 10 strategies for developing a culture of generosity. So if you want more details, you feel free to get that. You can go to my website at travismoody.com or at amazon.com and get that book. But I want to talk mainly about, 6 strategies or ways you can improve during this season of the COVID virus. So let me just first, here's what I was thinking I would do. I would just give you an overview of what the situation I think is. Go through these 6 ways of improving your finances during this season of online services only, and then open it up for questions. So again, for the most part, from the view of the members or the people in the congregation, most people have not been good financial stewards of their finances. So this is going to be a time that a lot of people will be hurting. I won't go through all of the details on the statistics, but most people don't have a lot of money saved. Nationally, there's a study that came out that said 40% of adults have less than $400 saved, and 58% of adults have less than $1,000 saved. Now, this is a national average. I would say that in Memphis, we're probably worse off than the national average. So the overall thought from the congregation's perspective is most people live paycheck to paycheck, and they're totally dependent on this week's paycheck to make ends meet. And so anything that's causing them to not work is going to be put a hurting on most people. From a leadership perspective in the church, again, I'm coming from the same perspective as most of you. I'm on staff at a church. And from a leadership perspective, most churches, again, the average church does not have an online service. And this is all new. Not having an in-person service is a new phenomenon for them. So this is a big deal for most people. The majority of churches don't have a lot of online giving. Again, if you're, have 75, 80% of your people giving online, you're not going to be hurt as much as the rest of the churches. So I'm not talking to those churches. Again, I understand that, but, again, most people don't have a high percentage of online givers. And a lot of churches are either mainly or totally dependent on what we get in collection on Sunday to cover ministry expenses. So that's what I wanted to give is I think this is the situation for the majority of the churches. So I wanted to give some tips or ways to really, how do you flourish during this time? So the first one is, it's important to keep people engaged, even though people are not meeting on Sunday. The most important thing we can do is to keep them engaged. And so some of the things that we're doing is we're connecting with every church member by phone. We've divided the whole church into 10 groups, and each leader has 10 people that they're calling. And so, that's for us, that's over 7,000 homes or giving units. And we're making somebody's calling each one of them. So I don't know how many people in your church, but I think it's worth it right now to spend time connecting with everybody. I think this can help us grow stronger as a church even after this season of the virus. But we're connected with everybody, and we're utilizing the Jethro principle. Again, I'm assuming that people are familiar with what that is. But in Exodus, when Moses' father-in-law Jethro saw him trying to lead millions of people out of Egypt, and he was trying to manage everybody, he said, Moses, you can't do this. You're going to wear yourself out. He said, divide the people up to 10s, 50s, 100s, so that you can manage them, and they just bring the big issues to you. Well, that's kind of what we're doing. So again, if we got over 7,000 family units, we need at least 700 people making calls. And so I would encourage you to create your Jethro principle. If you're a church of 200, that means you got at least 20 people making calls. And we have this system everywhere from Pastor John on down. So it's everybody. Like there's someone calling me, and then I'm calling some people. And when we call, we're really just asking 3 questions. The thing I would definitely encourage you is definitely don't call them asking for money. All right, this is not what you want to do. This is not the time to be asking for money. But the 3 questions that we're asking, how are you doing? Again, the purpose of this is just for engagement. And also we want to make sure that they're staying engaged in the services. So we're asking them, hey, which online service are you attending? So for us, we have 4 services. And so we want to know if they're attending services. And the part of the reason why this helps financially, because in our online service, we're also taking offering, so they'll get all the information. But if they're not watching any of the services, that they could lead to also not giving. And the 3rd question is there anything I can pray with you about? So again, we need to continue to be the church during this season. For instance, I had the 10 people out of the 10 people I called, one of them found out his mom died that day. She actually died that day. I did her funeral a couple of hours ago. Another one I called, he had surgery. I didn't know he had surgery. He was in the hospital. So, it allows us to continue to stay engaged. The things that we would typically do on a Sunday morning, we got to do them outside of church. And so, again, I think this is huge. You gotta keep people engaged. The second thing that I would focus on is communicating a compelling vision. The thing that we found over, at least at our church, and I think this applies to most people, is people don't give to fix the roof or to pay the pastor. They give to vision. And so we have to communicate what the church is doing. And so I would encourage you, and Pastor John at the Life Church always do a great job of identifying 5 to 7 initiatives, things that we can actually do and people can see, that people can rally around. Again, rarely people don't give to fix the roof. They're just not going to do that. But if you say, hey, we're trying to reach these people and we need to make room, then that gives them something that they can connect with. I would also encourage you, when you think about these 5 to 7 things, I would encourage you to at least consider having something dealing with kids. Because again, most people love doing something for the kids or the next generation. And I would also encourage you to do something in the community that's outside your church. So for instance, we're committed to feeding families in the community on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And so we can rally people around that. So you got to think about what in your church, what can you rally people around? They can give to that. And when you set vision, you got to communicate, I think, not from the sense of lack or need. You can't talk about, well, we need to keep giving. You need to tithe so that we can keep the church running. And that's just not setting a vision tone for people. It would be much better to say something like, hey, let's keep the church strong during this season so that we can be healthy and help other people and help other churches. That's just a much better way to communicate vision than to say, hey, we're going to have to shut the doors and we can't pay the mortgage. I would also, as you communicate vision, I would encourage you to do something like create an emergency relief fund. And this is something that people can rally around, and they see the big need. And this speaks to those in your church who have a surplus. And there are going to be some people in your church who are not struggling financially, and they're looking for how to help. And this is a good way to get them to rally around giving toward a cause. So the third thing I would recommend is to minimize non-essential spending, at least for this season. But even if you have a surplus, because this is a time where you could be available to help other churches. And so, again, we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know all of the outcome, but man, if you have a surplus, this puts you in a really good financial situation as a church. But also, I mean, we got to think about not just the church, our church. We got to think about the whole church, and it may be that we need to help other people and other churches. So I would encourage you to minimize any non-essential spending. That was one of the things that we did at our church. The fourth thing is, I would say, is if you don't already have data, giving data, is I would gather the giving data for your church. You need to know where you are financially. And so some of the financial things that we look at is we look at the percentage of digital givers, online givers. When we started online giving, we saw it go from 30% to 50% to 70%. And, we're somewhere around 83%. But if you don't track it, you don't know where you are. And I will also encourage you to break down all your giving data into what we call giving bands. And I'll show you an example of that. So here's an example. We have, you see 5 different bands. The first band is from $1 to $200. And then the second one is from $200 to $1,000. And all the way down to the band 5 is $10,000 or more. And so it's helpful to understand what your church, how your church looks. So you want to know how many givers in your church are giving over 10,000. How many are giving from 5,000 to 10,000? You need to understand that data so that you know how do you disciple those people. Because you're going to speak differently to the person who's in band 2 than you would the person in band 5. So if you don't already have that data, again, it's worth it to spend the time knowing that data. For a typical church in Memphis, for instance, if you have 100 giving units, and in band 5, you got 10% of your giving units are giving over 10,000, but they're giving 50% of your income. I think you're going to have a different conversation, with those people. So again, it's good to know, and I know, that is a concern from a lot of churches and pastors not wanting to know, but I don't know how you can disciple and lead your people without having this kind of information. It's like not knowing who in your church can sing. You're not going to start your worship songs without knowing who in the church can really sing. And it's the same way with giving. You need to know who in your church really has the gift of giving. Number 5, I would suggest, is having an effective offering moment during online services. One of the things I've seen, I get to see a lot of churches. I'm a church geek, so I like to see how churches do and talk about money. And quite honestly, a lot of churches don't do this well. So I don't know where you are, but I want to give you some tips. I'm hoping you do this well. But the offering moment, even online, it needs to be an act of worship. So during that time, if you have a chance to check out one of our services to see how we do it. I'm not saying that we have the perfect way of doing it, but it is an act of worship. There's a song, and we've been doing it for so long that it's not doesn't feel awkward. And I would encourage you have to clearly communicate, make it easy for people to give. I was showing a lady this past weekend. She's elderly lady. I was showing her how easy it was to give, and she only had to push 2 or 3 buttons, to get it. And so you want to make it that easy. And you have to clearly communicate online how to do it. You have to act like they've never done it before. Also, during this time, this is not the time to pressure people, guilt people into giving. I mean, I think that's going to backfire if we try that, especially not this season. I wouldn't recommend it any season, but especially not during this time. If we try to guilt people into giving or pressure people, it's not going to work. And I just don't think this is the right time for us to do this as a church. We like to use what I call generosity words, more so than tithe words. And we try to use a 10-to-1 ratio because we use tithe, and we encourage people to tithe at the church, but we use tithe and offerings or generosity. And if we say the word tithe once, you'll hear us use the word generosity or giving 8 or 9, 10 times. And I would encourage you to speak to people around generosity more so than tithe. And I know that may sound a little weird, but the thing is, the people in your church who are actually giving, the majority of people who are giving to your church, they're already tithing. And if you never talk to them about generosity, you're missing an opportunity. A perfect example of this is I was talking to a guy at a church who was making $400,000, and he gave the church $40,000. And but he was giving $60,000 to the Boys and Girls Club, and then he was giving another $50,000 or $60,000 to another nonprofit organization. And I asked him why he didn't give more to his church, and he said, "Well, no, they never asked for more. They only asked me to tithe." And so you can spend a whole lot of time talking to your church about beating them over the head about tithing and not get $40,000. But if you talk to this person who has the gift of giving and loves the Lord, if you talk to them about generosity, now you're talking about giving above the tithe. And so I would encourage you to work that into your words that you're using from the platform. The other thing is, during the offering moment, connect people to vision. Again, it's connecting them to this. It gives us the ability to change people's lives, to impact people for Christ. Vision versus their duty, and it's their responsibility, which it is. But again, if you want to build a culture where people are giving, it's connecting them to the vision is a better way of doing it. We share testimonies. We don't do it every week, but we share video testimonies, or we'll share testimony from the platform. Again, our offering moment is not a long, it's only a couple of minutes, but we try to connect people with the vision. And sometimes a video testimony of how people's lives were impacted connects people to why they give. And the final one, before I open up for questions, is provide giving appreciation. And the thing is, most nonprofit organizations understand that when somebody gives them money, they send them a thank you note. The church is the only place that doesn't do that. And so we've made it a big part of our culture to thank people for their generosity. And so the 3 ways that we do this, the first one is, so anytime someone gives for the first time, we send them a thank you note. It's just a thank you note. They say, "Hey, we based off our data, this is the first time you've given, and we just want to appreciate you and thank you for giving." And it's just a quick note that it's a form letter. It's not handwritten or anything, but everybody gets it the first time they give. The second one is really important. It's any special large gift. So for us, we say it's over $1,000. And this is a unique gift. If a person gives $1,000 every month, $1,000 every week, that's not a special gift. But if this is the first time somebody's given written a check or giving a $1,000 gift, we send them a handwritten thank you note, and it comes from one of the pastors. And again, it allows us to build a relationship with them. It allows them, again, most of them are shocked because no church has ever given them a thank you note for the most part. And it allows us to get to know them, to build a relationship with them. And again, if somebody can write a check for $1,000, you better believe they got more. And so this is a good way to build some equity with a person who has resources and they have the gift of giving. And then the third one is, I just think sending periodic thank you notes to people who've just been faithful giving. Maybe it's not huge, maybe it's not $1,000, but they've been consistent giving to your church, and especially during this time. If I had a small church of a couple hundred people, and I would probably send this to everybody who's been faithfully tithing and giving to the church. I would probably send them a handwritten thank you note. Again, appreciating their giving. What that does, it encourages people to do the same behavior. So I'm going to open it up for questions. I think Pastor Joshua is going to help me with that.
Yes, and I'm going to stop your screen sharing so we can get you back on here full screen. So for anyone that has any questions, again, use the Q&A function, not the chat function, and we'll get those questions answered to the best of our abilities. But I want to start our discussion off with this is sort of baseline question. If my church is not doing any type of online giving right now, where do I get started? What's my step one?
Okay, so yeah, you'll need to, there's lots of different companies that do online giving. And you got to find one that's compatible to your whatever database management system that you have. And every church has a different one, but you got to find one that's compatible to yours, because they are not all the same. So I would start with whatever database you have and ask what giving system, online giving systems are compatible.
And when I'm starting this journey, is there any type of special equipment do I need? Do I need an IT department? Do I need to pull one of the kids in from youth church and figure out how to do it? Like what type of resources do I need in terms of manpower or expertise?
Yeah, so that's going to be different for every church, depending on the size of the church and the size of the giving. But it has to start with the financial, whoever the financial person, that's going to be the one that's going to have to drive it. It's not as much an IT person as it is the financial accounting or whoever's tracking it. The database is critical, because if whoever's using the database, they can tell you what they need to make it work.
Right. So I have two questions in that case. One is going to be coming from Pam, and we're going to, I'm going to ask that one second, but the first one is about this database. How do I even start collecting data if I don't have a database or some way of tracking financial giving?
Okay, you went out. I couldn't hear the last part of that.
It was asking, so if I don't have a database or I'm not tracking financial giving, how do I start collecting that type of data?
Okay. Yeah, I'm probably not the best one to answer that, because that's a database question, but because I would assume that would be a new church or a smaller church just kind of starting out. And I'm probably not the best one to answer that question.
Okay. Well, but then this one does go directly to what you were talking about with our thank you notes. Who is the one that's writing those thank you notes? Are they just written by someone and signed by the pastor, or are they handwritten by a member of the pastoral staff or the pastor themselves?
Okay, great, good question. Yes, so they're handwritten by a pastor, and it depends on, so we have 5 campuses, and so the campus pastor would be the one writing a letter. It depends on the amount. There is an amount that it would go to Pastor John writing it. There's an amount that it would go to an executive pastor, but for the most of them, it's if $1,000 gift, it would go to the campus pastor.
And so I think one question that I have would be looking toward the long term, if this becomes our new normal a bit longer than where we'd hope that it would be, saying through April and May and possibly June. How do we stay consistent in making sure that we're making the appeal to online giving, as well as not only staying consistent in making the appeal, but consistent in the follow-up? Any tips or just experiences around maintaining that type of consistency?
Yeah, I think you got to make it the new norm. I don't think you can go back to the old system, because the way that people handle money now is all online. It's all electronic. Unless they're, at least they're, under 60 years old. And so it is the way that the church of the future is. So I mean, I would encourage you want to have online giving. It's not going to be a choice, and you want to get to 75 or 80% of your people giving that way. What that does for a church is that how a lot of churches, I guess, when during the summers when people are taking vacations, the finances drip off, or maybe during a Christmas holiday. Well, when you have online giving, you have a high percentage online giving. That doesn't happen. It's the same every, the summer's just like any other month. And so I think you got to go to that.
Okay. I will say personally, that is the truth. Whether I'm in church or not, every 2 weeks, the church is getting a tithe contribution from me.
Yeah. Well, and I guess you would also, I mean, that's how if you have a mortgage, that's how you pay your mortgage probably. And if it's like gas and water, I'm sure you don't go down to the MLGW and pay. It's just not the way people pay bills.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage you, man, to make it a normal. And another step that I didn't recommend is, if possible, encourage people to do recurring giving. Mm-hmm. All right. So, because most people, they know what their paycheck is. Some people they're a business owner or something. But a lot of people, they know I get a certain amount on the 1st and a certain amount on the 15th. And so we call those people that set up recurring giving, we call them generosity champions. And so I would, that's something that we started last year. One of our leaders had an idea to do it, and it has been working great. And it helped us during this time.
Thank you. So we have another question coming in from Barbara Green. She says that the church where she's at has been currently have online giving for about 8 months, but most of that giving is done on Sundays. And she wanted to ask about about the chart and specifically about the annual giving. Is that just based on the online giving, those figures that you were examining, or is that including offering plate and online?
That was total. That was including what's collected during the Sunday service as well as online. And so Barbara, so we have, if you take those numbers, so we have 83% of our givers give online. That means there's 17% drop either check or cash in the buckets. So, but we also have, just like you, we have about 8 or 9% of those online givers give during the service time. So if we have a total of 26%, I hope these numbers don't confuse you, but we have a total of 26% of people who give during church service. Some of them are online, and then the other ones drop in a check or cash. The majority that leaves 74% that don't give while they're at church. They give outside of church and give online. I hope that makes sense.
All right, so what I'm hearing is, because I'm not a numbers person, so if I understand it, I'm going to assume that others can understand it, is that during Sunday worship, you have about close to 30% of the church who are giving in that moment, or either dropping or cashing to or whipping out their phone and opening and pressing pay to give in their tithes, while 70%, just roughly 70% of folks who are giving while we are not in worship service.
Correct. That's exactly right.
And we have another question from Barbara, and I don't want to miss, there was another from Pam, but I'm going to jump on Barbara's first because it ties in about having a small congregation. How do we encourage those who are giving in the plates to move over to online giving? And Barbara's church is currently using PayPal as a giving option.
Okay. So we make it, the way that we encourage people is when we talk about it from the platform, whoever's doing it, the pastor's doing it, says, this is how I give. And so we started that language to help guide people to say, hey, well, this is how I give. It's encouraging them to do it the same way. We let them know it's safe. It's easy. This is how I pay all of my other bills. I can prioritize it by making it recurring. And so we present that as a as the best way of doing it. Not that people can't give in service. We don't say that that wouldn't be a good way of giving, but we talk mainly about online giving.
Yeah. I'm going to offer an unsolicited opinion. As the young guy on staff at the church where I serve, I have become de facto tech support, not for anything with our giving, but for some of the technologies we're using to reach out to our congregants. But what I've found is that particularly folks who are not tech savvy or have not had an opportunity or a need to engage with technology consistently, they just need someone to sit on the phone with them and talk them through the steps as patiently as possible. And so it might be as simple as, while we're making those cultural adjustments, making sure folks know that there is someone at the church who will sit with them on the phone for 20, 30, 40 minutes if necessary, just to get them comfortable with the technology.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something that we did when we were launching this is we did the text to give, and we just asked people in church service, hey, we just pull out your phone. I'm gonna walk you through how to do it, to set it up. And whether they gave or not didn't matter. But we wanted everybody to set it up on their phone. So everybody has an app they can give. And once you set it up, it's like you push 2 or 3 buttons and you're in. You're done.
That actually flows right into Pam Phillips Burke's question about a church that is doing live stream modified services for the first time. They're streaming online for the first time. During the offering time, is it just part of the announcements? Is there an actual time for folks to whip out their phones and give online right then? What type of structure would you suggest during this for churches that are live streaming for some of the first time?
Yes. So we have an offering moment, and where somebody, again, we have different services, but during that offering moment, we say, hey, this is the time where time for you to give toward give to God, bring your tithes and offerings. We point to on the screen, say, the bottom of your screen, there's a place here, you can click on this and you can give this way. And so again, we make it simple. It's on our website, and so we direct people to it. But yeah, I think you got to do it during your online service. And now I'm not saying take a long time. This should take more than a minute or two.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. And so I think I'm going to begin to bring our time to a close. Pastor Moody, thank you so much for taking this time to gather with us virtually as we explore how we can best maintain giving and while also caring for our congregants throughout COVID-19. For all of you who are attending, thank you for your questions. In a moment, I'm going to start sharing my screen again, and it'll just have some basic information about how you can continue to connect. Again, you can visit the Church Health website at churchhealth.org, and for faith communities, it's churchhealth.org/FCE. You can also join us on our Facebook group, which is the Memphis Clergy COVID-19 response. And you will be getting a follow-up email once we end this webinar. Again, thank you for joining us, and look out for more in this series of webinars of how we can continue to be the church and do the work of the church and care for one another throughout this crisis. I pray you all best, and I'm going to share my screen with any final announcements. Have a great day. Again, thank you all for coming, and Pastor Moody, thank you for being here. And look out for further communication from us moving forward. You guys have a great
Thank you.